So in today's video I want to talk all about this beast here, the tripod, the trusty tripod. If you watch my channel quite often you'll know I absolutely love a tripod. Now I want to talk more specifically today about how I think a lot of people out there aren't using their tripods properly, aren't getting the best potential out of them, and perhaps the way that they're using them is actually having a negative impact on their photography as a whole. Image sharpness, composition, things like this. So I'm going to hunt around for a first image. We're at beautiful Morecambe Bay today. The conditions are fairly decent. We'll get into that a little bit more. Let's go and see what we can find. So, welcome back to the channel once again, guys, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in. And yes, chatting all about the tripod today, but like I just mentioned there, we're out in gorgeous Morecambe Bay, so a little bit of coastal photography today, but the tide, whoa, that is sloppy. The tide has gone way out and it's still on its way out, so we're nice and safe, and you know, there's not going to be any of the sea within the frames, but we've got stunning views, you know, back towards the Lake District National Park. Over my left shoulder there, you should be able to see in the background, that is what I believe to be Lancashire's only sea cliffs, I think. And yeah, there's definitely a good opportunity for some landscape photography today, with the tripod, of course. Now I've come to this end of sort of Morecambe Bay, where, as you can see, it's very, very rocky. You know, the other end where I've spent quite a lot of time is just sand, which has its advantages. But yeah, I wanted to come down here today to hopefully try and use some of these rocky areas as foreground, really. You know, I think it's gonna make some fantastic photographs, especially looking back towards the mountains, and most importantly, it's going to help me to talk about one or two things with regards to the tripod. Also, I mentioned briefly the conditions. It's a sort of day, let me just put this down, it's a sort of day where, you know, any sort of normal non-photographer would look out the window and say, oh, it's a bit of a rotten day, you know, it's flat, it's overcast, it looks a bit dull and bleak. That's probably true, but those, you know, that's the hand that I've been dealt today, so I'm going to try and make the best of it. You know, there's definitely some wonderful photographs to be had in these conditions. I'm going to try and embrace that bleakness and try and let that sort of shine through into my photography. So yeah, like I said, let's hunt around, see if we can find something to get ourselves set up to start with. Of course, with the tripod. Come with me.
Down by the sea, of the water, the coming way.
Wow, so I'll tell you what, guys, all of a sudden it has got pretty grim. The wind's picked up, there's a little bit of rain every now and again, but we're out here living the dream, and we're set up for the first shot of the day. Oh man, it's a bit chilly as well, I must admit. Now, tripods, I run quite a lot of one-to-one workshops, landscape photography workshops, where I'm out on location with clients who are obviously using cameras, and in most cases they're using tripods, and I've just seen people, you know, continuously make these really small, seemingly insignificant mistakes, but grouped together they can have quite a negative impact on your photography. So I've chose three which I think are the most important that I'm going to talk about in this video. Now this first one for me is definitely the most important, but it's really easy to fix. You know, it's a real quick fix, very, very simple. And that is, make sure whenever you're using your camera on a tripod, make sure you've got a self-timer set on your camera. I have a 2-second self-timer. If you've got a bit more of a flimsy tripod, it might be worth using a 5-second timer. Concept here is really simple. When you take a photograph, if you haven't got a self-timer on, as you press that shutter button, you're actually pressing down into your camera, you know, and it's actually causing this kind of, like, I don't know what you'd call it, like microscopic camera shake. You might not realise it, but excuse me, if you don't have the 2-second timer on, your camera unfortunately is going to capture that tiny little bit of shake, and it's going to have a negative impact, like I said, on the sharpness of your photograph. So just stick a 2-second timer on, and I'll show you here as I take this photograph. You press the shutter button, the idea is you take everything off and then it takes the photograph. It gives the camera and the tripod a chance to stop shaking, just to relax and calm down, and it's going to improve the sharpness of your photograph, the image quality. You know, this is something that I've talked about before on this channel, about, you know, how to generally improve the quality of your images and the sharpness of your photographs. And this is really important. And look at this. If I've got this on single shot, so no self timer, if I'm just taking a shot like that, look at that, I'm pressing down on, I might as well be shooting handheld. There's no point in having it on the having the camera on a tripod at all. Look, I'm touching the camera. It's not right. So make sure you get into that habit whenever using a tripod. You can also use a remote shutter, you know, a wired one or a wireless one, probably even better. There's an exposure delay mode on most DSLRs, exactly the same concept. The end goal is that nothing is touching the camera or the tripod when it takes the image. So, nice simple composition here to start. The texture here in the sand is beautiful, and kind of working well with that, there's quite a lot of nice texture in the sky. And over here I think we just got these nice rocks that lead us out into some of the Lakeland fells. Probably not going to be the best image I've ever taken, but it's a great one to help display this technique with the self timer. And I think I've definitely captured some of that bleakness that we've got here today that seems to be getting worse, but we're going to work with it. So ISO 100, f9 and 1/100th of a second, and 2-second timer. There we go. I hope you like this shot. Right, next idea about tripods. I don't really know what to call it there. This one's going to sound a little bit counterproductive really to people that have never heard this before, but this is about not using your tripod really. And I don't mean like shoot handheld, don't bother using your tripod at all. I mean, don't be so quick and so habitual in always getting your tripod out when you first stumble across a scene, all right? Make it probably the last thing you do when you're ready to take the photograph. So actually do it in reverse. You want to be looking at a scene. You don't really even need your camera out, to be honest. Usually I'm just walking around. And then make the tripod do the work at the end when you know where you want to put your camera. I see all too often that people get the tripods out, they extend them out fully so they're at eye level. It makes sense because it's nice and comfortable to have your camera up there whilst you're doing all your settings. But unfortunately it means that you're really limiting yourself, and you might not even realise it. You know, you're limiting yourself and thinking, I can only take my photograph from here at eye level where I've got my tripod set up. But like I said, do it in reverse. You're in control of that tripod. You're the king of that tripod. And what I do, I talk about this in my ebook, you know, my ebook on composition in landscape photography. This is one of my favourite processes of landscape photography now. I've stumbled upon this rock. Usually I don't even have my camera, and I just spend 2, 3, 5, 10 minutes wandering around, thinking about things. What lens do I want to use? What do I want in the frame? What do I want out of the frame? I want this rock in the frame. I like these textures in the sand down here, these lines that lead into the rock. I like the mountains in the background. It's got to be wide angle. And the tripod comes kind of last really, because I'm literally here looking through the viewfinder, and I'll think, right, where do I want my tripod? Where do I want my camera, sorry, and I think I want it there. And I say this in my one-to-ones, I'll visualise it, you know, right, that's where I want it. So then I get my tripod over and make it do the work. It might be a bit of faff, but ultimately I get the tripod where I want it to be, and that is so important. Okay, so yeah, just to summarize, I suppose, don't always be tempted to get your tripod out to start with. Have it right up at eye level so it's nice and comfortable. Put it where you want your camera to be. It sounds so simple, but I see people making that mistake all the time. So I'm going to do just that now. I'm going to get the camera or the tripod set up nice and low so I can really make the most of this boulder and some of these beautiful textures in the sand. So you might have noticed, got a new jacket on, I've been home and got my down jacket and my gloves, but that's not the primary reason why we're home. I think my Canon M50, so my video camera that I've been using throughout this whole video, I think it's just broke. About an hour, over an hour ago now, it fell over during one of the clips, smashed into the sand, and I think, fingers crossed, it's just the lens that's broke, but it was coming up saying F00, which I believe means that the lens and the camera aren't communicating, so hopefully it's just the lens. Either way, I've been home, got the jacket, got the gloves, I've ordered a new lens for the M50 on eBay. Oh man, absolute nightmare. Fortunately, I've got the trusty old Canon G9X, so we can continue today's video. Anyway, back to the subject of tripods and this composition. We've got this one nice and low. So as I was saying, what feels about 3 hours ago to me now, it's so important to make sure that you're in control of where the tripod goes. It may look like a ridiculous position, but ultimately this low vantage point is going to benefit my composition. You know, if I was up at eye level, like I was saying before, if that was just my nature to set my tripod up right up here, plunk the camera on top, this image would look totally different. It's this low perspective on the tripod that I want here. I'm shooting at 1/10 of a second, so for me that's way too slow of a shutter speed to shoot handheld, so the tripod is more than necessary here. So that's why I've gone for this low vantage point, and really what I'm trying to get is these lines that lead up to the rock, these nice little channels, and honestly they look fantastic. And again, like the first image, guys, I have to say this isn't going to be the best image in the world, but hopefully you're going to see how the low vantage point definitely gives it a little bit of something. We've still got some gorgeous texture in the sky. I think actually the sky's got a little bit better from when I was here before, so that's good. And yeah, them channels lead us nicely into this rock, which I'm putting centrally in the frame. I'm focusing about 1/3 of the way into the image, and f11, ISO 100 and 1/10 of a second. So I'll grab that now, and I'm using the 2-second timer like with the first image, and that looks fantastic. So I'll show you that now, and I've got one more that I want to show to you that I think you'll find pretty interesting. I hope you like this shot.
Give me love, give me all your love, oh, 'cause I want you. No one else makes me feel this way, don't know what you do. Hold my hand, could you hold my hand, look me in the eyes. You and me, yeah, that's all I need, and I'll be alright.
Alright, so this is the last one really, or the last of the three most important ones that I wanted to mention in this video. This is one that I've not really ever read anything about. I've not seen people talk about this before, but I think it's so important, and it's again quite similar to the first one with the camera shake. It's all to do with camera shake, but it's something that you might not realize is actually happening. Okay, today is a perfect opportunity for me to talk about this, and this is all about windy days. So quite in a similar sense, like I said about when you press down on your shutter button, you're actually shaking your camera. It's the same when you've got quite high winds. All right, so I think what I'm trying to say is you mustn't think that just because your camera is on a tripod that it's immune to any sort of camera shake from the wind. This is an expensive tripod, you know, it's with the ball head and the tripod, it's over 300 quid. It's a really good, sturdy tripod. But even now, I mean, it's probably not even 20-mile-an-hour winds here. There's camera shake, okay, and that is actually accentuated when you're using a telephoto lens, and that's exactly what I want to show you here. So I'm taking this photograph here, I'm in a portrait dimension, I'm zoomed in at about 250mm, okay, which is just going to increase the amount of camera shake that we're getting from the wind. We've got this gorgeous little patch of light back over to this broken jetty towards Heysham Power Station. I'm capturing some of these cliffs that are jutting out into Morecambe Bay. All in all, it's just it's the light, I think, that's making this photograph, that's attracting me to make me want to shoot in this direction. Really, there's a nice glow. But if I magnify in right on that jetty and then I take my hand off the camera, I can see that it's shaking all over the place. You know, it's really shaking, and that's just because the wind is hitting the camera. And again, this is something that you might not realize. So to combat this, I mean, looking at it now, it's telling me my settings, I want to shoot at ISO 100, I want to shoot at f11. It's telling me that my shutter speed is 1/5 of a second. That's too long. All right, because you're going to capture all that camera shake exactly like the first image where I was pressing it, you know, 1/5 of a second. Unfortunately, with a long lens, it's shaking a lot, you're going to capture that. So this is something that I would do to combat it. All right, first and foremost, I'd reluctantly open up my aperture a little bit, so I'd probably go to f9. Actually no, I'd probably go to f8, I don't mind that, okay, which allows me to get a bit of a quicker shutter speed, 1/8 of a second. That's still too long, you know, in my opinion. So I'm reluctantly going to increase my ISO, and let's go there, let's go for ISO 800, and that'll do me. So now my settings, f8, ISO 800 and 1/80th of a second. You know, rule number one when you're using a tripod landscape photography usually is shoot at ISO 100. But this is one of those rare instances where you just can't do that. So I'm going to grab that shot, 2-second timer, and that's a nice quick shutter speed, 1/80th of a second, you know. So any of that camera shake that we're getting from the wind is going to be eradicated pretty much because we're shooting at 1/80th of a second. Whereas if we were shooting at 1/8 of a second, that's a slow enough shutter speed, you know, that's going to have captured all that shake. So that actually looks pretty nice, that photograph on the back of the camera. I hope that comes out nicely. And I also hope all of that makes sense. So same as the other two, I'll show you this photograph now. I really hope that you like it, and I hope it's come out sharp as well. Okay, so I'm going to get myself home now and get a brew, because this wind has been fairly fierce, to be honest. Proper gutted about the old Canon M50, but fingers crossed it's just the lens and it'll be back to good health in no time. But as always, the main thing is thank you guys so much for tuning in, much appreciated. I really hope you got some value from today's video, and yeah, give these things a try when you go out, you know, especially the 2-second timer one. Just be wary of the wind, you know, and how much it shakes your camera. And that second tip as well is, you know, make the tripod do the work. That's what it's there for. Get low, get high if you need to as well, if it suits the composition. Don't just get into that habit of setting your tripod up at eye level just to put your camera on every single time. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next adventure. Out.